Last time on Heaven's Lost Property, the writers somehow had a collective stroke and made the anime equivalent of getting kidnapped and having your bone marrow forcibly removed with a rusty ice pick. They took the best character in the manga, threw away everything that made her such, and brought her back for a quarter-assed attempt at a climax before quickly wrapping up by hand-waving away that she was just magically good and a main character now. Meanwhile, I lost all faith both in the franchise and the whole of humanity, and spent my time alternating between screaming at the top of my lungs and sitting in bewildered silence contemplating the feasibility of suicide. So, hopes weren't high for the movie. Announced at the very end of episode 12 of Forte, Heaven's Lost Property, a Clockwork Angeloid, was the TV anime's very first major motion picture, set to premiere in Japanese theaters that summer on June 25th, 2011. And here's the thing, right? I was actually excited for it back then. I mean, how could I not be? It was more SNO. You have to understand that at the time, I hadn't even begun to grasp just how much they had fucked up with Chaos. I mean, by the time that Forte ended, the manga only went up to around chapter 45 or so, and Chaos wasn't really anything special at that point in time. All that hate and animosity from Part 7 was only realized well after the fact. It was only years later, when far more of the manga had come out, that I finally understood the full extent of what they had done, and that my hatred began to boil and fester. And that's why therapy is important, kids. Don't be like Sai. Don't hold your anger in for 8 fucking years and become a monster like him. But as I said, I was excited for it back then, and judging purely from the trailer, the movie looks set to adapt chapters 34 through 42, aka Hiyori's arc, with a few extra comedy chapters thrown in for good measure. So, once Forte ended, I waited the 6 months until the movie was finally released in Japan, but of course I couldn't go to Japan. So, I waited and waited. An entire year passed, during which my hype bounced back and forth within me like flubber, slowly gaining in speed and intensity for the day that I would finally lay eyes upon this masterpiece. And finally, almost exactly a year after it had first premiered in Japan, at a point when I couldn't contain my hype anymore, the first subtorrent of the movie was finally released, and I practically exploded with joy. About an hour and a half later, that child was dead. He didn't look it. He still walked around and talked and shit, but if you looked close enough, you could see that he was well and truly dead inside. Oh, poor sweet child. If only I had known. But here's the funny thing, it didn't have to be this way. As I said in Part 7, what they did to Chaos would invariably ruin any event in the manga in which she took part, which is most of it. But Chaos gets trapped at the bottom of the ocean around chapter 30, and then doesn't reappear until chapter 45, and those intervening 15 chapters are Hiyori's arc. So, by adapting that section of the manga, this movie contains the last vestiges of plot they could have possibly adapted faithfully after what they did to Chaos. So, it was never a certainty that this would suck. But let's face it, the same writers that did what they did to Chaos were still the fucking assholes in charge of this movie. Its sucking might not have been a certainty, but it was pretty much inevitable. Like clockwork, you might even say. But even I couldn't have expected just how truly wretched this piece of shit could possibly be. And let me clarify really quick. Nothing in this movie gets to the same level of true horrendousness that chaos-eating fish did. Nothing here is that bad. Oh, it's bad alright, but it's not that bad. But even if this isn't the objectively worst thing to ever happen to the anime, the movie does hold a special place in my heart as being my wake-up call. The thing that took that innocent child filled with love, passion, and pure devotion for everything SNO, willing to look past even chaos and the fish, and finally shook him awake to just how truly atrocious this world can be sometimes. Clockwork Angeloid isn't the worst thing flying SNO's flag, but it was the original thing that killed it for me. If you've ever watched a video of mine and thought, wow, why is he so cynical and negative all the time? Well, this movie played a big part in building that person. And I thank it for that, sincerely, which is why, using the skills that it taught me, I will now both receive immense enjoyment from, and take great pains to, rip this movie to bloody, quivering pieces. So, enough stalling! Let's finally take a look at Heaven's Lost Property, A Clockwork Angeloid. So, the movie starts in a really weird place, in medias res halfway into chapter 42, except not really, because in medias res sorta dictates that the audience eventually finds out what's going on, which we don't, a lesson they sadly never learnt. Now, a more accurate description might be, the movie, for no reason at all, starts halfway into chapter 42. You see, I thought it might have been to establish the comedic tone, but even that doesn't work because this scene isn't funny so much as it is confusing because of the absence of context, even for someone like me who's seen the show, let alone all the poor parents who got dragged to this piece of crap. And I could complain about the scene more, but I think it says enough that it is so pointless that I can just completely ignore it and that you won't miss anything. Oh, that's odd. I wonder what that number is. Anyways, after that, we cut to Daedalus in Synapse, who finally gives us a handle on some context with a recap. Now, does she explain, like, what the Synapse is, or maybe Minos and all the people sleeping in pods since they'll all be relevant later? No, none of that. She instead tells us that she was the creator of these things called Angeloids. She doesn't explain what Angeloids are or what they can do, just that she made some things called Angeloids, and I guess that's all we've got to go on right now. She then pontificates on the morality of giving all the Angeloids emotions and combat powers in the first place, wondering if they would have been better off if she'd just left good enough alone, which is, really dumb. Yeah, guys, so they, forgot their original purpose as abused slaves because I gave them lasers and shit. Damn. Wow, well that scene was pointless. Anyway, we thankfully cut away from that to hi footage from season 2. Wow! We're 5 fucking minutes into this garbage, and they're already recycling animation wholesale. They didn't do jack shit to this. It is literally just footage from season 2. Like when I take an old episode, slap it into my editing program, and cut out the clip that I need. Except that I'm a YouTuber, and this is a film produced by a professional company that people had to pay money to watch. And you didn't even bother to cut Sukuta out of this shot. You can still see him. How fucking lazy can you get? What 4-year-old edited this? And oh boy, get used to asking that question, folks. So, we then cut to Ikaros, imprisoned in the cage that she was locked up in before falling to Earth in episode 1, and it's here that I have to pause to explain something. I want to take you guys into my head, so you can know just a fraction, just a tiny amount of the thoughts that run through my mind on a per-second basis. So, here's the scene, and here's my unbroken stream of consciousness while watching it. So, I see Ikaros hanging there, and my first thought, after of course pausing to admire the craftsmanship that went into the excessively detailed shot of her tits, is to think, wait, why are there other cages? I mean, okay, Ikaros was locked up after her tantrum because she's strong to the point that they could barely stop her, so presumably she posed too big a danger to continue operations. That makes sense, but presumably Ikaros' cage would have only been purpose-built after she destroyed most of Synapse, right? That would make sense? But I count 5 total cages in this shot alone, which raises the question, how often do you need to eternally imprison an Angeloid? Yeah, Ikaros is a danger, I get that, but any other Angeloid could have just been reprogrammed, right? I mean, who else would you even want to lock up here? Astria maybe, but Nymph's nowhere near strong enough to warrant that. And who else would be deserving of a cage? The cleaning Angeloids? Like what? If they forgot to do the dishes one day, you send them to eternal imprisonment in the fucking pointless cages outside? But then, like I said, just reinstall her Linux or whatever, and that would probably solve the issue. Or you think they have some sex Angeloids locked up there because their performance wasn't up to standard? And speaking of, I wonder if Minos ever took Nymph here for some BDSM shit. As demonstrated by that lovely shot of Ikaros' tits, there's tons of potential for bondage play here. And God knows there are a couple fan artists out there who would love to jump all over that if it was canon. But, I mean, that's if bondage would even begin to satisfy Minos at this point. God, you think humans are fucked up now when it comes to the shit that gets them off. Imagine if that train of weirdness were left unchecked in someone's mind for billions of years. You probably wouldn't even need to be touching his penis anymore. At this point, he can probably only get off to, like, licking the eyeballs of orphans or some shit. And pause. There you go, folks. That is exactly what it's like being me and watching this. Every smallest little detail that they get wrong, my brain locks in and then hyper-focuses on, to the point that I just spent like 2 minutes going on the most ADHD possible rant about there being more than one cage, a completely irrelevant background detail of a 2-second shot. And it's not just this one scene, it's like this the entire movie, or fuck, my entire life. I can't turn it off, but I also can't let it go on like this. I've got way more important shit to talk about than calling out every slightest continuity error or stupid bit of narration they make. So instead, here's a counter of everything that I could have bitched about, which I'll bring up at the end of the video in a lightning round. Hopefully with its help, this video will come out under a century long. So, where was I? Oh right, Ikaros was falling. And I swear it's only just occurred to me, but why is this happening during the daytime? Ikaros fell at night in episode 1. And no, I am not putting that on the counter, because while this is a nitpick, it is a very significant nitpick, because it highlights just how few shits they gave making this steaming turd. You think that someone, at some point, would have checked the footage from episode 1. Oh, like maybe, I don't know, well they were stealing all the other fucking footage from episode 1. So, as Ikaros reenacts that shot from the opening, we get our title card. Heaven's Lost Property, a Clockwork Angeloid. And thus begins the recap. The fucking recap. Now, this is where anyone coming into a Clockwork Angeloid expecting a movie from such paltry evidence as the word movie appearing all over the place in the advertising, and the fact that people have to pay for movie tickets and buy Blu-rays before they would deign to let us watch it, are going to be disappointed. Because this isn't a movie. It's a glorified OVA with stolen footage padding out its pathetic actual runtime to an hour and a half. Because for the next 40 minutes, I repeat, 40 fucking minutes, the movie is just a recap. Nothing but a stitched together abomination of shit you've already seen with the express purpose of stealing your money and wasting your time. Now, the problems with the recap are as numerous as they are varied, so I've created a helpful itemized list dubbed Why This Is the Worst Thing Since Cancer to help streamline your understanding. Why this is the worst thing since cancer, number 1. It's not actually recapping anything. You see, I might refer to it as a recap, but trust me here, actually telling you anything about the plot was the furthest thing from the genuine intentions behind this. It's not at all hard to do a recap that doesn't last for 40 fucking minutes. In fact, you could probably pretty comprehensively cover the basics of everything about SNO's plot in 5 minutes or less if that was the actual goal. But it's incredibly obvious, even to the most uncritical eye, that that's not the case, because they show exactly nothing related to the plot in 40 minutes. No Daedalus, no Minos, no fight between Ikaros and Nymph, no backstory on Ikaros being a weapon, no harpies, no chaos, no nothing. Believe it or not, they don't even bother to show the scene of Ikaros imprinting on the Tomoki from episode 1, which you'd think if they were going to show anything in a recap, let alone a 40 fucking minute recap, that'd be like on top of the priority list, right? Well, apparently not. So if the recap fails miserably at recapping anything about the TV anime, the logical question would be, well, what's the point of it then? Why this is the worst thing since Cancer number 2. It's literally all filler. Blatant filler. 40 minutes of shameless filler. 40 minutes of disjointed comedy scenes that not only fail completely at the stated intention of telling the audience anything about what's going on, but that also screw up even being funny without the crucial context that made them such in the show. It honestly, truly feels like I'm watching a YouTube video right now. A Sora no Tashamono funny scenes compilation edited together by some 12-year-old in the most disjointed and unfocused way possible. No narrative structure, no purpose, no rhyme, no reason. Just, hey, here's a bunch of scenes I thought were funny, and when one ends, I'll smash cut abruptly to the next one. For 40 fucking minutes. Why this is the worst thing since Cancer number 3. No, Japan being weird doesn't excuse this. Look, I know that recap movies are popular with Japanese animation studios, and from a business standpoint, I'll even concede that it makes perfect sense. Why not double or even triple down on profits by reusing animation you've already made before? I mean, if people will pay money for that, and apparently they will, why not? However, there are two major differences between this and how an anime recap movie is usually done. Why this is the worst thing since Cancer number 3, subsection A. Coherency. As stated before, the SNO recap has no coherency, and so utterly fails at what it's trying to be. If I walked into the Madoka recap movie, knowing nothing about Madoka, at the very least by the end of the movie, I would know that this is Madoka, that magical girls exist, and that they fight witches. Conversely, if I had just watched Clockwork Angeloid's recap, I wouldn't be able to tell you shit for dick about anything regarding the story or characters. In fact, it is my pet theory that the only reason that dayless recap at the start of the movie exists at all is because otherwise, everyone watching this would have no idea what any of the Angeloids' names are, because the recap sure as hell doesn't bother to tell you. Why this is the worst thing since Cancer number 3, subsection B. Truthfulness in advertising. People walking into something like Madoka Eternal or Gurren Hen knew that they were getting recaps. All the marketing for both very clearly established that if you paid money to see them, you'd be paying for chopped up scenes from the TV anime, with maybe a few bits of original animation here and there. A Clockwork Angeloid, conversely, was marketed both as a completely original work and as a continuation of the main plot. And not only did the trailers and assorted marketing for this movie not even hint at the presence of a 40-minute recap, but they also didn't bother to mention that several of the scenes that they do show aren't in the movie. Like, look at this shit. There are 10 separate cuts of animation in this trailer, and of those 10 cuts, 6 of them are complete bullshit. I repeat, over half of this trailer for the movie contains things that are not in the movie. This scene isn't in the movie, nor is this, or this, or this. So, what does that mean? That AIC Asta and Kadokawa are grade A bullshit artists? Potentially, yes, but I actually have a less cynical theory. It is my hypothesis that, originally, A Clockwork Angeloid was in fact planned to not only include all those scenes from the trailer, but also to spend the entire runtime telling Hiyori's arc just as promised. However, a troubled development cycle meant they had to completely rework the entire movie at the last possible second, taking bits and pieces of what they'd already made, throwing out several scenes and probably entire plot lines, and stitching together whatever remained in a mad dash attempt to meet the release date, while simultaneously creating the recap to fill in the missing holes and stretch out the runtime to an hour and a half. Now, I don't have any concrete proof of that, granted, but I do have some conjecture. In late 2010, a few months before Forte began airing, AIC and all of its subsidiaries, including our very own AIC Asta, were bought by Oizumi, a pachinko manufacturer, along with all the IP rights that they owned. Oizumi subsequently had AIC's animation divisions create some fresh cuts and other assorted artwork for a few of their properties, like Is This a Zombie?, Strike Witches, and notably for our purposes, Heaven's Lost Property. Yeah, SNO got a pachinko game, but it doesn't end there. Once Oizumi had bled all of AIC's properties dry, it subsequently sold them less than 7 months later to Aplex Corporation, an advertising firm who intended to use them to make anime commercials for Samsung phones in China and Southeast Asia. And it's important to note when exactly AIC was flipped. On March 10th, 2011. Just 3 months after Clockwork Angeloid had been announced, but also 3 months before it was due to arrive in theaters, right smack dab in the middle of production. Now, based on all of that, you want to know what I think happened? I think that AIC Asta had finished making around half of Clockwork Angeloid, but then their new corporate masters in China didn't give a shit about some fanservice vehicle they had promised to make, and told them to throw together something vaguely resembling a finished product from what they'd already made, and to just publish that to fulfill the obligation. That would explain everything. The recap, the fake marketing, why the movie feels half-finished, the abundance of plot holes, and all the go-nowhere scenes we'll talk about later on. It would also explain why Eternal My Master was the only SNO anime adaptation not made by AIC Asta, but was instead picked up by Production IMS. Which, by the way, if A1 Pictures is the McDonald's of anime, then Production IMS is the Burger King. Almost exactly the same thing, just less popular. Now, you might know Production IMS from such all-time classics as 100, Masuo Gakuen HXH, and Gonna Be the Twin Tail. And if Eternal My Master's abysmal quality suddenly snapped perfectly into place once you realized it was made by the same hacks that made Gonna Be the Twin Tail, then don't worry, because you weren't the only one. Also, you want to hear the really sad conclusion of AIC's story arc? 3 years after Aplex bought them, for $8.5 million, they had failed so abysmally that they sold AIC back to its original CEO for, get this, $70. No, not $70 million, not even $70,000, $70. As in, not even enough to buy a Blu-ray copy of Clockwork Angeloid. But that seems to have been done mostly for the sake of the thing, because AIC hasn't actually made anything in the last 4 years, and so is probably for all intents and purposes dead. So, that's why I think the recap happened. Now, does that mean that we're done talking about it, or ready to forgive AIC for it? No, it means we're done talking about the broad strokes of the recap, and that now we get to dig into the nitty-gritty of exactly why and how it's awful. You see, knowing their tragic backstory doesn't make this movie any less of an abortion, and I don't intend to be any kinder to it because of that. It is still a commercial work of art they charged a frankly insulting amount of money for, and it is still a blight on my favorite manga. So, the recap is framed like this. It starts by introducing us to a sort of new character, Kazane Hiyori. And I say sort of because we technically already have seen her as a background character 3 separate times in Forte. Once in the forest outside of Sugata's camp, once as an angel laying inside a pod in the Synapse, and once as an extra in the pool episode. But this is our first official introduction to her. So we almost immediately flash back to, quote, the first time that I became aware of him. The following anime original scene depicts Hiyori in a home ec class when Tomoki accidentally bumps into her and spills all her ingredients over the ground. He offers his hand, she looks up, and it's love at first sight. Okay, look, I'm gonna level with you here. I will be the first to admit that Hiyori is not that great a character. She is really one note, and a lot of her arc either doesn't make sense or is done really poorly. But one of the few things that I think Sumonosuke got really right with her is her reasons for liking Tomoki. In the manga, Hiyori's admiration for him comes from the fact that she was ostensibly living a double life. As mentioned in part 4, we're told that Hiyori's parents died 2 years ago, and she's had to take on the surrogate mother role for her younger brothers, and now has to manage the farmland they left behind, in addition to maintaining her active social life at school, and has decided to keep that part of her life a secret. And meanwhile, she sees Tomoki doing whatever he wants, whenever he wants, and is envious of that freedom, gradually growing to admire him from afar for that reason, up until she reaches a breaking point and decides to both join the New World Discovery Club and to ask Tomoki out. Despite the shortcomings of her arc, that bit all makes sense and squares away nicely. The movie manages to ruin even this, because now it's just love at first sight. That's it. She saw him, realized that he was the main character, and instantly wants to ride his mushroom for no discernible reason. Why? Just why? Why? Why did they feel the need to change that? What possible reason do they have to take away character development that she had in the manga? What does it add to the movie to shove in this scene and retcon her interesting reasons for falling in love with Tomoki into utterly generic Disney princess bullshit? Oh, and it actually gets even better later on, because there's a later anime original scene where it turns out they actually were friends when they were kids, and they both just forgotten about it. And if you were worried the shitty retcons would end there, then boy are you gonna be happy. Because the framing device for every scene in the recap is constant, never-ending Hiyori retconning. And as you would expect, that too is done in the laziest possible way. They show a scene from the TV anime, it goes on for like 2 minutes, and then they cut to a shot of Hiyori also watching the scene, and repeat. For 40 fucking minutes. So, you see, even though we've never so much as heard her name before now, Hiyori's actually been in the show the whole time! And it's just so funny, in a really sad, depressing way, how most of them are literally just minutes-long scenes of random bullshit, and then we cut to a 2-second long shot of Hiyori staring blankly, and that was the justification for that scene, apparently. Moving on. Hey, did you know that Hiyori was there when the group made curry in episode 3? Yep, there she is picking random shit from a bush for no reason. Hey, did you know that Hiyori's underwear also got caught up in the flying panties fiasco? Yep, there she is. Hey, did you know that Hiyori was the one who grew the candy apples nymph ate in the festival in episode 8? Yep, God knows where she grew the apples though, since we only ever see her with that one plot of land. Ooh, maybe they were what she was picking from that fucking bush. Hey, did you know that Hiyori was in the audience watching Tomoki perform in episode 10? Yep, there she is, right there, you can totally see her, she was totally there the whole time. Why? Why the fuck do we need to know that Hiyori was in the audience watching Tomoki perform? What does it add to the story or to either of their characters to know that? Oh, I'll tell you what it adds, about 40 minutes to the fucking runtime. This is like Star Wars prequels levels of horrible retconning. Everything has to be explained. Every possible lingering plot thread has to be connected, all to Hiyori. Nymph wasn't just eating any candy apples at the festival, they were the ones Hiyori grew. Astria didn't just decide to eat rabbit food because it's totally in line with her character to do that sort of thing. Hiyori had to be the one to tell her about it. You know, watching this, I am legitimately shocked that they didn't make Hiyori the one who grew Ikaros' watermelon. Oh my god. I was kidding! Really? Really? Hiyori was the one who taught Ikaros how to grow watermelons. So, that watermelon patch we saw in Forte, that was because of Hiyori too, was it? Oh my god, there is not a middle finger big enough for this bullshit. And while I'm complaining, there is a ridiculous amount of Hiyori fan service in this recap. And the thing is, none of it is funny fan service. None of it's for the sake of a joke or the result of anything humorous. It's just, hey, here's a random upskirt. Or, hey, here's Hiyori during that Hot Spring episode. No rhyme, no reason, just fan service for fan service's sake, which has never been SNO's style. SNO's fan service is almost always in service of the comedy, but now it's just there. You see, this is the kind of shit that feels like some producer somewhere made a quota of panty shots the studio had to meet so that the slack-jawed drooling mongoloids in the audience would be so distracted by the tits on screen that they wouldn't notice how horrible the movie they're watching is and demand a refund. Okay, so that's everything wrong with the recap. Or, well, everything important that's wrong with the recap anyway. Which means 5,000 words in, we can finally start talking about the actual new content. Jesus Christ, someone kill me. So, 45 minutes in, the movie finally fucking starts, with Hiyori walking into the New World Discovery Club and asking to join. We see Sugata flash back to seeing Hiyori's angel lying in a pod in Synapse, as he tries to figure out what it all means. Now, he's initially going to reject her, upon suspicion of being a spy for the Synapse or something, but Mikako mentions that a new member would bump their club size up to the medium rank, and raise their budget considerably in doing so, as Sugata rushes to congratulate Hiyori on joining. Tomoki initially turns to leave, but Mikako informs him that security for medium clubs is much higher, and that he'll be forced to attend every day from now on. However, being tortured by Mikako on a daily basis doesn't work for Tomoki, so he conspires to get Hiyori to quit the club by making her take part in his usual shtick. However, both unfortunately for and unbeknownst to Tomoki, Hiyori has a massive crush on him, so getting to spend time with him only increases her resolve, and confronted with an immovable object, Tomoki's force eventually stops. So, I hope you got your fill of plot there, folks, because it's time for yet more anime original filler! What? You thought 45 minutes of filler at the start of the movie would get us to that coveted hour-and-a-half mark? Not even close. So now we have a 4-minute montage of everyone hanging out together, with yet more Hiyori fan service thrown in for no reason. Then they go fishing, then they go hang gliding, then Hiyori and Ikaros go out on a date and talk about watermelons apropos of nothing, and ooh, what's this? A scene from the manga? How delightfully unexpected. Well, I say that, but it is also a filler comedy scene, which normally I wouldn't mind, but since we're currently an hour into the movie and only about a 10% plot to filler ratio right now, it can go suck a dick too, manga adaptation or not. Oh, and don't worry if you thought we might at least get some funny filler since it's manga material, because in one of the most bizarre scenes in the entire movie, and just think about that for a second, in one of the most bizarre scenes in the entire movie, they show us the build-up to the comedy scene, but then proceed to cut the comedy scene. No, I'm serious. This shit has to be seen to be believed. So, what is supposed to happen is that Sohora, Nymph, and Astria are all sitting around wondering why someone as popular as Hiyori has been spending so much time with someone as unpopular as Tomoki, until Mikako bursts in and suggests that it's because he has blackmail on her. So they all buy it and burst into Tomoki's room demanding the photos, and when he denies it, start forcibly searching the room, and eventually end up mistakenly activating a card that transports them to a train inside Tomoki's mind. Every few minutes, the train stops at a station called something like a date with Tomoki, or a kiss with Tomoki, and if they get off there, they have to do the thing, and the severity increases over time. Eventually, they all jump off and have to cuddle with Tomoki naked before finally being transported back to reality, whereupon Hiyori bursts in, sees Tomoki's wounds, and starts caring for him while explaining that there was never any blackmail in the first place. And it's like a character building moment for all of them, right? It makes them all confront their feelings towards Tomoki directly, and it makes them feel bad both for assuming malice on his part in the first place, and seeing Hiyori dote on him as he suffers from the wounds that they themselves gave him, makes them wonder if Tomoki might not be better off with Hiyori instead of any of them. Throw in a good laugh here and there, a splash of funny fan service, it's a good chapter. In the movie, they have the conversation about Tomoki blackmailing Hiyori, go to confront him about it, Tomoki denies it, and then Hiyori shows up, tells them they were wrong, and they go, oh, and then apologize. That's it. Like, you do know you're supposed to be making a comedy, right, movie? You're supposed to be making comedy scenes that make people laugh, not scenes where people talk through their misunderstandings and come to reasonable conclusions. Because that's not funny. You can't cut the comedy scene, keep the build-up, and then piss on the spark of intrigue until it fizzles out. You remember my theory from earlier? That this movie is a stitched-together Frankenstein's monster of thrown-away scenes? This is the scene that really confirms that for me. Because guess what? Those fake shots in the trailer earlier, 2 of them were of the Tomoki train scene. So I think they planned to include it, but then something happened. Maybe my theory about the Chinese company putting the ixnay on production, maybe the budget ran out, or maybe the entire writing staff threw themselves onto Chaos's wings to atone for their sins, as well they should. But regardless, I think they planned to include the whole scene, but then just couldn't and had to cut it, and this is what we're left with. Also, if you've watched Eternal My Master, this whole thing might seem weirdly familiar to you, because they actually redo the whole scene in that movie, and shock upon shock, remembered to include the funny bit that time. Of course, that means they have to have all 3 of those characters get mad at Tomoki again in the exact same way, but for a different reason, which unintentionally makes all of them look like shallow, awful people who will learn a lesson 1 second and then completely forget it the next. But baby steps here, people. We're only dealing with a team of professional writers adapting a source material that's literally being hand-fed to them. You can't expect them to be able to write a consistent story all the time. Anyways, Hiyori coming out to defend Tomoki meant that she had to reveal her whole farming thing, but she's shocked to discover that Tomoki is incredibly approving of her hobby, which is the grain of sand that finally tips the scales, as we see Hiyori straight up tell him, "I'm in love with you," before asking him out on a date. So, we have reached the end game, ladies and gentlemen. This is where, 20 things go wrong all at once, and just dig in, because I've got some serious expositing to do. So, I'm gonna go back and explain the whole arc to you in the manga, so you can once again gain an appreciation for just how many things have been changed, and just how shitty those changes are. So, the first time that we see Hiyori in the manga is in chapter 24, which was adapted in episode 5 of Forte. Sukuta infiltrates the Synapse with Sahara, but he's surprised to find the whole place seems completely abandoned, except for the Angeloids keeping the place clean. Eventually he comes across a high-tech dome where he finds thousands of angels asleep in pods, one of which looks exactly like Hiyori. They're forced to leave by the Harpies, and as they return, he tells Nymph what he saw. She can't tell him what it means, but she does say, "Don't worry, you are real." Then we of course meet Hiyori in person at the end of chapter 34, when she knocks on the door of the New World Discovery Club and asks to join, which, as we discussed earlier, is motivated by a desire to get closer to Tomoki. There are no flashbacks here trying to cram Hiyori into previous events in the manga, thank fuck, but Sukuta does let her in because of the club budget thing, Tomoki does try to make her quit, which ultimately doesn't work, all of that was accurate. Then the rest of chapters 35, 36, and 37 are slice-of-life comedy chapters, whose purpose is to essentially ingrain Hiyori as a character into the main dynamic of the story. And at the end of chapter 37, Hiyori tells Tomoki that she loves him, but unlike the movie, doesn't immediately ask him out on a date. She just says that she'll give him some time to think about his reply and leaves it at that. The next night, Tomoki sees Hiyori while walking around, and they have a little impromptu date under the cherry blossom tree. And on the way back, Tomoki begins to answer Hiyori's confession, but as he looks up at her, he sees too late a truck whose driver has fallen asleep at the wheel. He tries to reach her in time, but she's hit, and with a sickening crunch, dies. Almost as soon as she's hit, a brilliant light erupts from her, and her body begins to disintegrate in the telltale way that implies synapse-level technology is behind it. And as Tomoki looks upon her disappearing body, he can physically feel his memories of Hiyori being deleted one by one. Suguta, who was at the time infiltrating Synapse again, realizes that his memories are being deleted as well, and rushes past the harpies and into the dome, only to see Hiyori's angel sitting upright in her pod, the realization hitting her as well. She turns and sees Suguta, calling out to him, but he replies, "Who are you?" Hiyori's angel bursts into tears and frantically starts typing on her pod's keypad, begging to see the same dream again, until Minos enters from stage right. He tells us that everyone's memories of Hiyori are being erased by the system, but notices that one person is still hanging on. Sakurai Tomoki. Back down on the surface, Tomoki is madly sprinting around town, trying to figure out what happened while keeping desperate hold of his memories, until Ikaros and Nymph approach him with guilty faces. He demands an explanation, but just as Ikaros starts, Nymph interjects, yelling, "Don't, Alpha! The deletion won't work if he knows the truth!" But Tomoki grabs her by the shoulders, shaking her back and forth and yells, "Say it!" And with tears in her eyes, Nymph says, "That around you, Hiyori isn't the only one who's not real," as the last of Tomoki's memories are finally stolen away. Huh? What was I doing? Oh well, time for dinner. Chapter 39 begins with Nymph idly watching the weather report, and trying to deal with the guilt of what she allowed to happen to Tomoki. Now, Ikaros wants to tell the truth, but Nymph decides that if they can just make Tomoki happy, they'd be able to forget the horrible memories from the night prior. So after being inspired by one of Tomoki's porn mags, they try dressing up like maids, another scene from the trailer that isn't in the movie by the way, giving him a massage, cooking him a fancy dinner, and in a wonderful bit of foreshadowing, cleaning out his ears because they'd been hurting all day. But regardless of what the task is, Ikaros is able to effortlessly outclass Nymph when it comes to taking care of Tomoki. So in a desperate final attempt to make Tomoki happy and cause her bad memories to go away, later that night, she tries sleeping with him. Tomoki freaks out for a bit, but they both eventually settle down and start a really nice, genuine conversation about how Nymph still wants to imprint onto Tomoki, but he pushes back at her again, saying that he just wants them all to be free. Now, Nymph reasserts that at this point, it's less about her programming or wanting to be ordered around, and more as a symbol that she actually loves him. And also, a sort of quick, half-tangent shout-out to just how ridiculously far Nymph's character has come since she was first introduced. Anyways, this conversation gets abruptly cut short as Tomoki begins screaming out in pain and bleeding from the ears, as the main trio finally notices that the air pressure in the entire town has been rapidly falling to below survivable levels. They realize that it's because the Synapse has sent a weather weapon hiding inside of a giant tornado. So they fly to it and blast away its cover to reveal Hiyori, who immediately begins to attack them. We cut to Daedalus screaming at Minos in the Synapse. "What have you done? How could you turn a fellow angel into an angeloid?" And he says, "What? I gave her what she wanted. I let her see the same dream twice. Now, Zeta, kill them all!" Nymph decides that they have no choice but to destroy Hiyori, figuring that since everyone's forgotten about her, it won't matter anyways. No one will be hurt. But then Tomoki appears behind her and says, "No, Nymph, you're the one who'll be hurt." So Tomoki and the gang show up and reveal that they all now remember Hiyori because they all have bullshit main character powers. As I said, Hiyori's arc isn't the best in terms of writing quality, and come up with a plan to hack into Hiyori and remove her imprinting, thus freeing her from Minos. They get Nymph up to her, but Hiyori begins to counter-hack her, trying to re-establish Nymph's original imprinting to Minos. There's a struggle of who'll hack the other for a bit, until Tomoki starts shouting, "This is an order, Nymph! Don't you dare lose!" the order she's been so desperately craving, and something that Tomoki hates doing, but looks past himself in the moment and does anyway to give her the confidence boost she needs. And she goes, "Yes, master," and activates a mysterious power within herself, which we find out later is the self-evolution program Pandora, allowing her to, just for a second, evolve into Nymph version 2. Minos yells at her, "Stop it, Beta! Return to being my Angeloid and live in the sky once again!" But Nymph screams back, "Shut up! You are no longer my master!" and activates the fundamental particle jamming system, Aphrodite, which successfully outhacks Hiyori. They both pass out from the struggle, but when Hiyori wakes up again, she's back to normal. And although the change into an Angeloid is apparently permanent, she doesn't seem to mind that much, as having weather powers helps out with her farming. She tells Tomoki that she'll be quitting the New World Discovery Club, because she, quote, "knows who you like, at least," but leans in and gives him a kiss goodbye before successfully going back to her old life. Okay, that's Hiyori's arc in the manga. So now that you all know that, we can talk about how the movie fucked it up. So, as I was saying, Hiyori just asked Tomoki out, along with crucial change, specifically inviting him out on a date the next day. We cut to Sugata visiting Daedalus in the Synapse, and oh fuck, I forgot about this bullshit. You see, this is what I meant when I talked about Chaos eating fish infecting everything like a cancer. In the manga, no one meets Daedalus until the final chapter. But in the anime, since it's been established they can just pop into her room whenever they want, it begs the question of why they don't do that all the time. Why they don't have her magic up a solution to all their problems. Or indeed, why they don't just have her explain everything about the synapse to them. Well, Sugata has the same idea, asking her to explain what was up with Hiyori's angel in the pod. But Daedalus just decides not to tell him for no reason except that if she did, it would break the plot. So Sugata says he'll just have to go find out for himself, and walks out to go confront the Harpies, and for all Daedalus knows, die, because she won't tell him what should be a trivial piece of information. But again, the plot would break if she did, so she doesn't. And by the way, I have been waiting for a good time to talk about this, and since we just got a look at Chaos, I guess now is as good a time as any. Yeah, where the fuck is Chaos? I mean, yes, we saw her in the pod just now, but why? Oh, I'll tell you why. It's because the writers realized they had Chaos as a main character, and she would probably instantly wreck Hiyori in the big final boss fight later, because she is unto a god. And because they didn't want to have the big final action scene only be 5 seconds long, they had to find a way to write her out of the plot. But no, I'm not going to let you get away with that one, AIC. So, why is she in the pod? Or the question I guess I'm really asking is, when does this movie take place in the overall canon? The answer to which is, I don't even think the movie knows. We're told that Chaos is in the pod because Daedalus is still performing updates on her, which I guess means this movie takes place between the ending of episode 11, when Chaos gets put in the pod for updates, and the end of episode 12, when she is ostensibly fixed and released, right? Well, for the longest time, that's what I assumed, but no! Because we see Hiyori at the pool in episode 12, and she was very obviously not angeloidified. So, yeah, I legitimately think the movie doesn't know when it takes place, because we've got some lore-drawn levels of timeline convolution with this fucking plot, which is, of course, and sing it with me here, folks, an inevitable result of what they did to Chaos. Back on Earth, Hiyori is walking up to her date with Tomoki, and on the way gets hit by a bus. If I made that seem like it came wildly out of nowhere, that's because it did. So, unlike in the manga, there's no date beneath the tree before this happens to give this any sense of weight or drama. It's during the daytime instead of night now, which makes the whole thing frankly laughable because of how bright and colorful everything is. And in what is probably the biggest and most drastic change the movie makes to the manga's plot, Tomoki's not even there to see it. He's busy on top of the cliff waiting for her, and as Hiyori disappears, Suguta, realizing his memories are being erased, even though Tomoki doesn't realize for no reason that is ever explained, runs into the dome to see Hiyori, but in the anime, she's still asleep in her pod, which is yet another shit change that robs the scene of any tension or drama that it had in the manga. No Hiyori frantically trying to relive the same dream, no "who are you" line, no seeing Tomoki struggling to remember, none of that. Just Hiyori sleeping, Minos walks in, talks some shit, end of scene. And I'll remind you that this scene was supposed to end with Tomoki frantically running around town trying to figure out what's happened to Hiyori, which would have been, tense and exciting. Instead, anime Tomoki doesn't know shit for dick about any of this. We just cut to Tomoki later in the day still waiting on Hiyori while subconsciously fighting the memory loss as Nymph tells him that Hiyori had to cancel the date and he goes, "Oh, okay," and just goes home with no fuss whatsoever. Wow, I'm on the edge of my seat over here. Then we cut to Ikaros and Nymph talking about telling him the truth. And then the single weirdest shot in the entire movie happens as we cut randomly to a car driving down the road for, as far as I can tell, no reason at all. And no, I'm not bullshitting you here. Watch the scene. Watch this scene and then try to explain to me the purpose of the car shot. I dare you. I double dog dare you.
ニーフ、私、やっぱりマスターに日和さんのこと話そうと思うの。あ？
何言ってるの？分かってるでしょ。このシステムのことを話せば、トモキは気づいてしまうって。
話すべきなのか、私にもわからない。
So, is it trying to symbolize, the fog appearing in Tomoki's mind, and how if they told him the truth, it would be like headlights shining through the fog? Maybe? Now, you know what's way more likely than this being some kind of half-assed attempt at symbolism? They literally just cut to a car for no fucking reason. It was probably one of the shots they forgot to remove when they were Frankensteining this atrocity together. Well, hey, you know what? I can randomly cut to cars too! And guess what? Mine will be thematically relevant! So, like I said, they debate telling Tomoki the truth, but Nymph decides to just try and make him happy instead. Then we instantly cut from this scene to Nymph in bed trying to sleep with him, and wrong! This is wrong! In the manga, not only was Nymph seriously traumatized by Tomoki yelling at her and had the guilt of it eating away at her, which isn't even in the movie, but she also tried 10 other things to make him happy in a normal way first before resorting to this. But here, Tomoki hasn't even noticed that anything's wrong and she just jumps into bed with him for no reason. You can't do this, movie! You cannot rip random pages out of the manga and then tell the exact same story and expect it to make sense! Because now what was a perfectly logical decision and a nice bit of character development for Nymph has turned into a wildly out of character and insanely jarring scene that doesn't make any fucking sense! So, the next day... Oh, what? There was supposed to be a fight scene with Hiyori after that incredibly jarring out of character bullshit? Things were supposed to be interesting? Not in this goddamn movie! So, the next day, we cut to Tomoki at school, where we find out that no one else remembers Hiyori except for him, for no reason, which I would complain about, but the manga did the same thing, so whatever. So, Tomoki's like, "Hey, remember Hiyori?" And everyone's like, "No." And he goes, "That doesn't make sense," and runs out of the room. Then we cut to Hiyori finally waking the fuck up, the dozy cow, and we have this scene where she freaks out and makes a deal with Minos. Okay, so that scene's still in the movie, they just moved it around for no reason and made it infinitely less tense and exciting. Makes sense, they do have a boredom quota to fill after all. Then we cut to Tomoki running around to the surface with slightly more urgency than I think the situation demands from his perspective. Him running around yelling at people made sense when Hiyori had just died and subsequently disappeared in front of him, but not so much here where none of that is the case. So he runs around for a bit, and then bursts into his home to see Ikaros and Nymph standing in the doorway looking guilty. And no movie, I'm not gonna let that one go either. Why are they here? You just showed us they were in the same club room as Tomoki. Yes, I know this is how the scene played out in the manga, but events have been so drastically changed from the manga that now it doesn't make sense. So, you mean to tell me that they saw Tomoki run out of the club room in search of Hiyori, then decided to walk home, change clothes, and then stand in the doorway looking guilty for an indeterminate amount of time until Tomoki finally showed up? Again, all of this made sense when it was minutes after Hiyori's death, but you have fucked the timeline up so much at this point that throwing in exact scenes from the manga doesn't work anymore. Also, I should point out that we're currently 1 hour and 17 minutes into this, about 13 minutes away from the credits, and exactly nothing has happened yet. In the Olympic event of time wasting, this movie would force the judges to create a platinum medal because nothing else would be fitting enough. But what the fuck ever? Tomoki collapses not from the air pressure as in the manga, but from resisting the system deleting his memories. And as everyone is gathered around him, Nymph's radar picks up something approaching from Synapse. And who could it be but Hiyori? Hiyori steps out of her pod and is happy for a second until the pod eats her, which is an odd stylistic choice considering that nothing else from Synapse is drawn that way, but whatever. Growing into a crucifix clock, or a cruciclock, or a clockifix, whatever, and turning her into an angeloid who has but one order. Kill Sakurai Tomoki! So, 3 hours late and already drunk, the Climax finally stumbles into the party, and if you thought this is where the movie would finally stop being shit, then you clearly haven't been paying attention. So, the first change you might notice on the dizzying pile is that Hiyori isn't a weather angeloid this time, if that wasn't made clear by the title. Instead, we're told that she actually controls time. I suspect because they already gave the weather controlling thing to Chaos. And once again, the cancer that infects everything. It's honestly amazing. Chaos isn't even in the movie. The writers did everything they could to keep her out, and that plotline is still fucking everything up. But the problem with Hiyori controlling time now is that being a weather angeloid tied in really well with her character in the manga. The staff that her power came from was Demeter, who was the goddess of harvest in Greek mythology, which, obviously worked really well thematically with Hiyori, the farmer. But here, she just controls time for no reason. Except she actually doesn't, because guess what? They fucked that part up too! Now, let's just say that you're the writer for Clockwork Angeloid, and I haven't found out where you live yet. How would you write an action scene where someone could control time? Oh, well, there's all sorts of stuff you can do. Like maybe you could have her get hit a couple times, but then rewind time before that had happened and then dodge all the attacks effortlessly, like Shulk with the Monado. Or maybe when Nymph shoots an attack, you rewind Ikaros to be in the path of the attack so she gets hit instead. Or, depending on how the time reversal works, rewind Astria until she's either a baby or a lug nut. Yeah, no. In the movie, control over time equals force pushing them around. And that's not how you control time, you Paleolithic dick squirts. That's just psychokinesis from Destroy All Humans. So, Nymph decides they have to destroy Hiyori, saying that no one will be hurt by it, until Tomoki shows up and goes, "No, you'll be hurt by it," which is once again a scene pulled from the manga that falls completely flat here because they made paper angels with the original script. So, Nymph decides to hack into Hiyori by head patting her, but oh no, Hiyori's been equipped with anti-head pat technology. So instead of Nymph having a big emotional character moment, Tomoki ordering her not to lose, and activating Pandora to win, instead, she just gets thrown back and goes, "Oh, that didn't work. I guess we'll try something else." Excuse me while I grab a pillow to scream into. Okay, so, the big crescendo of Nymph's entire character arc? Yeah, they just cut that. It's gone. Oh, they kept in all the build-up, don't worry about that. They even left in the scene where Nymph flashes back to all her horrible moments with Minos, which, in the manga, was supposed to symbolize Minos trying to reactivate her original imprinting. They keep that, even though they removed the plotline that made any of it relevant. So, after the hacking plotline fails, never to be brought up again, they decide to blow up the clock, which does work, but it turns out Hiyori's got a self-destruct thing in her, which causes Nymph to say, and I am quoting here, "Oh no, if Hiyori exceeds a critical point in the spatio-temporal buffer, it's possible the space in this whole area will be annihilated." Which, whatever the fuck the bullshit Star Trek technobabble means aside, is basically that if she blows up, everything else around her will be destroyed too. Remember this. So, Ikaros decides to activate a Aegis around Hiyori, which Nymph says will contain it, even though I'm pretty sure the Aegis was designed to protect from explosions, not from annihilations in the spatio-temporal buffer. Again, whatever the fuck that means. But hey, Nymph says it'll work. But, uh-oh! Ikaros locked herself inside. So, get this. Ikaros says that she wants to die with Hiyori because we're the same. We were both given power we didn't ask for, as she flashes back to all the many times they've spent together. Like that one date where they retconned the watermelon thing. That was literally it. But then Tomoki comes flying in from off screen and jumps into the Aegis. The Aegis, which, by the way, apparently lets him float now. Yeah, kind of a weird design decision there, Daedalus, allowing Aegis to let people float inside of it for no reason, considering it was only ever going to be used by an Angeloid who could already fucking fly! Oh, come on, just power through, we're almost done. So, Tomoki shows Hiyori her hair bells, which causes her to regain her personality, because I'm pretty sure the writer of this crap is 10 years old. So, in her last moments before she explodes, Hiyori hacks Ikaros, and like the car scene from earlier, I dare anyone to tell me why she did that, then kisses Tomoki, flies up into the air, and explodes. Wow! Well, that's awful! Ikaros' Aegis is down. She'll destroy the whole town, or fuck the country. Well, I guess let's see that annihilation of the spatio-temporal buffer. Are you fucking kidding me? That was the big threat we were trying to stop. That. Completely annihilate the surrounding area. Fuck, I could have done more damage to the surrounding area with a fucking water gun. And then the movie just ends. Yep, just ends. Right there. And unlike the manga, Hiyori's dead. Yeah, there she becomes a main character, and we see her all the time, and she plays an instrumental role in Chaos's arc, but now she's just dead. Fuck you, end of movie, no refunds. Except, maybe not, because there is an after-credit scene which is unintentionally hilarious. I want you to watch it and then count how many different emotions Tomoki goes through in the span of 10 seconds. I swear to Christ, that animation was on par with the Zelda CDI games. So, Hiyori's alive, or maybe she's not. How? Who knows? Why? Who the fuck cares? The fucking end, thank God! You know, traditionally, this is where the Nostalgia Critic, or Spoonie, or whoever, would do a wrap-up of everything wrong with the movie, but what the fuck was right with this movie? As an adaptation, it fails miserably. Over half of this quote-unquote movie was just stolen footage from the TV anime with the most half-assed and pointless retcons imaginable. So many scenes were moved around for no reason, making them infinitely worse in the process, or just plain cut out, that the whole thing only vaguely resembles the source material. Hiyori's somehow even more boring here than she was in the manga, which has gotta be worth some kind of award, and all the changes they make to her and her arc only serve to make her somehow less interesting. Nymph was written wildly out of character, and Chaos was written out of the movie altogether, because I'm pretty sure by this point, the writers were trying to piss specifically me off, and the ending is a clusterfuck. SNO should not end on someone dying, because that is so wildly out of tone for the series. Yes, you can have characters die, and I'd say that some of the best moments of the manga are of that happening, but there's gotta be a happy ending eventually, because otherwise the tone goes flying out the window, and all the preceding comedy scenes now seem wildly out of place in lieu of the tragedy you know is waiting at the end. And it speaks to just how truly low the writing sunk that they did end up bringing Hiyori back to life after the credits, too late to save the tone, and with zero explanation, as some pathetic way to keep the Hiyori fanboys that don't exist from burning down their studio. You know, it is legitimately difficult to think of an element of the film that wasn't fucked up in some way or another. Oh, you know what? No, there was one thing, one single scene that I did enjoy. Here it is. There you go, folks. The one single joke that made me smile. The only good 5 seconds in the hour-and-a-half-long never-ending nightmare of ruined dreams, crushed ambitions, and the creators pissing on my fucking face. But you know what the sad thing is? Even if I take out my personal love for the series, like I pretend to watch it not being familiar with the manga and only vaguely a fan of the TV show, it is just so completely fucked on even the most basic level of being an enjoyable self-contained movie. Despite only being 90 minutes long, the whole thing feels like the biggest slog to get through, thanks in no small part to the 45-minute recap, yes, but even after that, it's just filler scene after filler scene, eventually leading to a 10-minute climax that's over just as soon as it started. It's full of scenes that go nowhere, characters I don't know doing things I don't care about, shots that feel like they were only left in because someone forgot to remove them, shitty writing, boring characters, terrible action scenes, a nonsensical story, and plot holes as far as the eye can see. Oh, and speaking of the plot holes, it is finally time for the lightning round. Every nitpick that I had to skip brought back as fast as possible and crammed down this movie's fucking throat until it explodes in a shower of viscera. So, let's begin. In that opening action scene you probably instantly forgot about because of how pointless it was, they actually cut the funniest bit of it from the manga where Tomoki combines with the chickens into a giant chicken Tomoki to fight Sohora. When explaining the Angeloids during her recap, Daedalus starts with Chaos and then works her way back through the rest of them in reverse order, which would give any uninformed viewer the mistaken impression that Chaos is the main Angeloid, which I of course agree with, but still probably not the intended message. Also, during that scene, Daedalus calls Ikaros, quote, the mightiest of all the Angeloids, which is blatantly no longer true now that Chaos exists. It's insane how jarring the cuts to season 1 are here, because there is such vastly different quality to the movie which was made 3 years later and with a obviously much higher budget. Hey, it's 2 characters that are relevant to the manga but not at all in the anime. I'm glad we took the time to introduce them by name but none of the fucking Angeloids. In this scene, Hiyori says, wow, he's so amazing, but how did you get Tomoki is amazing from Ikaros singing really well? The recap is told entirely from Hiyori's perspective, and yet we have a flashback to a scene she couldn't possibly have known about from Nymph's past. And also, the recap never tells the audience that Nymph ever broke away from Minos, so it is entirely possible you enter the rest of this movie assuming these beatings were still a regular and ongoing thing. Don't you love whimsically looking at your crush about to be killed by a snake? Okay, in the manga, Astria made a hole and sat in it, that was funny, but she didn't fucking dig a hole to Albuquerque. Tomoki, for some reason, keeps bullying Hiyori and trying to make her quit the club after his epiphany that what he was doing was wrong. It is so fucking stupid that Tomoki's motto during this arc is, I Will Never Forget Her, which is supposed to be aimed at the synapse attempting to erase his memories, but then the movie adds in a plotline where they actually met as children, and he literally did just casually forget her for no reason. This isn't really a complaint, but what is it with anime girls named Hiyori getting hit by trucks? It happened in Macaco City Actors, then in Noragami, and now in Heaven's Lost Property. Is the name Hiyori synonymous with the Japanese word for roadkill? When Hiyori steps out of her pod here, why doesn't she have wings? That's Hiyori's angel, not another carbon copy. She should have wings right now. How did Tomoki know to come to this exact spot in the middle of fucking nowhere after waking up randomly? Random panty shot in the middle of an action scene. You know, I insulted Shikugi no Shana for this shit a few parts ago. Here's a question. Once Hiyori gets her personality back, couldn't she just rewind time to before she became an Angeloid? And finally, one last fuck you to this piece of shit movie! I did it. I fucking did it! I got through everything wrong with Clockwork Angeloid. Oh fuck, I forgot. Oh no, oh god, no. I forgot I still have to watch that piece of shit. Oh, someone kill me. Someone please come to my house and shoot me in the fucking head. Oh god. Continued in part 9.